It's the Survivor Series, the epitome of tag team competition.
Okay, I won't make you listen to Vince McMahon destroy his vocal cords for another full minute. Welcome to Season 9, Episode 2 of Nerd with Dre and Jeff. This month's episode is on the 1990 Survivor Series, a World Wrestling Federation, now the WWE, pay-per-view. So yes, we'll be talking professional wrestling. We're going to be keeping up our theme of holiday ghouls, and this pay-per-view fits that, having two such ghouls, the Undertaker and the Gobbledygooker. I do actually want to briefly explain the format since it is really confusing. So there are 5 matches consisting of 2 4-person teams, and how those 4-person teams are put together is just arbitrary. Don't worry, we talk that a lot. However, it is still the standard one-on-one wrestling. So if a person is eliminated by pin, countout, or disqualification, don't worry, you'll hear all about disqualifications. Another person for their team comes in, and the last team with a member surviving wins. So it's kind of like dodgeball with wrestlers and more confusing. And there are like tag team dynamics. So the teammates standing around the ring can tag in, can interfere, all the classic stuff you may know from 80s and 90s wrestling if you grew up with it like we did or have seen it on the YouTubes. The pay-per-view gets even more confusing because it's the only time this happened in WWF history with the Survivor Series. But after those 5 matches are done, all of the surviving wrestlers of those 5 matches combine into 2 super teams that then do the exact same thing all over for a grand champion. I don't want to spoil the results or the weirdness of that. So either go watch the 1990s Survivor Series on Peacock, or if you have an old VHS, or you can listen and get it spoiled, but I'm not going to preemptively spoil it. Another random part about this pay-per-view is there is a giant egg that's been introduced, and it's just there throughout the match. What happens? Ooh, don't worry, we will talk that a ton. Also, very much like this match has the Undertaker as a special tag team partner, we brought in our own special tag team partner. David Bell from Gamefully Unemployed, that is spelled Gamefully, and then unemployed is spelled like it sounds. You can find them over at Patreon with the same name, over at YouTube, search on iTunes. They have all the feeds. They record podcasts on movies, The X-Files, Batman, and you can even produce your own podcast at the right tier for things like Kevin Smith, which I've done. And some people like Norm have actually produced podcasts on the WWE. And so what I would even recommend is if you head over to Gamefully Unemployed's YouTube channel and search for WWE, you can find them, and there are a bunch of great episodes where Dave is one of the most brilliant minds with some of the funniest things about wrestling takes. So I had to have him on for that and was really happy he agreed to be on. So why don't you go over to, let's say, Blue Sky. Yeah, Blue Sky right now. We'll date the show. He is Movie Hooligan, spelled Hooligan. If you didn't know how to spell hooligan, and let him know how much you love the wrestling takes, how much you love him on the show, or if you join their Patreon server, you can tell him on their Discord or over at Movie Night. Okay, on with the show.
It's the Survivor Series.
Hello, everybody, and welcome to a wonderful and glorious episode of Nerd with Dre and Jeff. I am the Jeff part of I'm the latter half of that title, which means...
So I am the ultimate warrior to your Hulk Hogan. And guess what, though, Jeff? Guess what? We have a mystery guest. We didn't announce it pre-show. But coming to you from Death Valley, California, for whom the bell tolls, the Undertaker himself, or as we know him, David Christopher Bell. Did you like the bell tolls, Bell? Did that work? Did that land?
I think that works.
Undertaker.
You should describe the joke more.
That's what you do. You describe the joke.
That's good
so
comedy.
People understand.
That is David.
Yeah, that's
Babbitt.
me.
Hi. So we wanted you on the show.
Wait.
Yes.
Thank you for having me.
Yeah.
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 Thank you.
Even though we made you watch
this,
this,
everybody.
We're good.
Oh, made is a strong word.
Of course, if you guys are reading the title card, if you see any of the information that we're working on here, we are continuing our season on holiday themed ghouls with the Undertaker's debut at Survivor Series 1990, which was on Thanksgiving. Yay, themes. Do you like how we found it?
Oh, I get it.
Right?
I get it. This is a Thanksgiving episode.
Yes, and the Undertaker debuted on Thanksgiving.
That's
Um,
amazing.
it is. What's even more amazing, David, is that this took place about 40 minutes from your place.
You
Um,
mean where in Hartford?
well, yeah,
It's
from where you were living at the
I
time.
mean, it was funny because I went through a few things because when they're like, we're out of Hartford, there's just something funny about wrestling happening in Hartford. And then I remembered Connecticut is the wrestling capital of the world.
Yeah.
It's where WWE is out of. It's where it all happens.
Yeah.
And that's like, I never stand back and think about how that's a very funny thing for Connecticut to be.
Well, it's also funny because like Connecticut is that just because New York would have been too expensive to be that.
Yes, but everything I know about Connecticut as this like waspy place, yeah, it's like,
Women's college basketball,
yep, and then wrestling.
wrestling. So funny story to share, which I've shared maybe before, but my dad, we were a family of townies, not a traveling group, and my dad hated going into Boston. And my brother and I, when we were, 8, I was 8 years old, so he was 10, right? We were like, Dad, there was a wrestling event, like a house show or something coming into Boston. We're like, can we go? We saw it on like Saturday Superstars or whatever. And he's like, no, I'm not driving into Boston, but I promise I will take you to the next show that's in Worcester, Providence, or Hartford. My dad just hated Boston.
I understand. Driving in Boston is a nightmare. Like I grew up with this idea, which is like I'd rather go anywhere else but Boston. Just driving and parking alone is a panic attack.
Because you go to like the Riverside T station and then have to take the train in, which adds another hour to your travel. It's a whole thing, right?
It's a whole thing.
Literally, we made my father sign a contract. We were 8 and 10, and my brother and I were smart enough to be like, we got to get this in writing. And he signed it. And then, like, I think maybe 2 weeks later, they announced the Survivor Series was coming to Hartford. So we were like, oh, buddy, because that cost him. That probably cost him a couple extra bucks. But he was a man of his word in 1990. And so he took us. So I was there.
So you're somewhere in this video.
Theoretically, with among the 16,000 sweeping. Now, I don't particularly remember too much of the view other than I remembered being behind Tito Santana when he gets the pin in the finals match. Like, I remember that being fully in front of me, like his back landing the move. Like from there, I could kind of extrapolate where I was to camera. On my second watch, I tried to like pay attention to that and failed terribly. But I got souvenirs. I got a Hulk Hogan tank top that, because I was such a roly-poly little boy, it continued to fit me my whole life until I wore it in my final boxing match in 2011, in which I ripped it off, which was stupid. That thing's worth a fortune, and I lost the fight. But I also bought a foam Big Boss Man nightstick, which was a terrible investment because if you have my brother bought the Hacksaw Jim Duggan foam beat you with a 2x4, right? That's a great piece of foam. Not the nightstick. It broke immediately.
It's such cop energy, though, Jeff. You bought a cop thing.
I know. I mean, he was a face at that time. Dave.
Wait, the cop in this? You're talking about the cop in this?
Yes, the cop.
I don't want to skip ahead, but I have a lot to say about that.
There's a lot going on there, yeah.
It's the 90s. It really, really the 90s, isn't it?
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, he was a great character, whether he would, because the other part about him, and we can get into him later, but he's a good guy in this, but he was a heel for most, like he was a bad guy for the most of his career.
Oh, okay. That's a little more reassuring. This was confusing. So I guess I want to say my background real quick in wrestling is that like I was sentient for like late 90s, when I was like
the Attitude Era.
All right, when I was a kid, it was more about like other kids in class talking about wrestling, but I certainly was paying attention to Stone Cold era stuff.
Yeah. Attitude Era, we call that.
Yes. And then I, stopped. I was never a huge wrestling fan. And then more recently, I've been tasked with a series of podcasts about wrestling, and I've sat and watched wrestling full through. And I'd say it's gotten awesome now. And that's all to say that this era, like the 80s into the 90s, Hulk Hogan, not my thing. And so
Is that
like,
because he was not good at wrestling?
well, that's sort of
And also that
he's
we now know that he's like kind of a racist piece of shit that sucks.
I more knew him as that, you know, but like I always had it in my head because I've watched his movies. Like I'm a big fan of Santa with Muscles.
Who isn't?
And yeah, and No Holds Barred. And it's always been one of those things in my mind where I'm like, how did he work? How was he such a huge wrestling star? And watching this, I'm like, I kind of get it. He's like kind of clown coded. Like he's like a clown, he's like a muscle clown. So it's like no wonder kids like him. Like he's kind of he's
I mean-
festive, he's bright, he does the crazy eyes. He's like good at working up the crowd.
I was going to say, Dave, when you're talking about watching Hulk Hogan movies, have you seen the movie, I want to say Suburban Commando?
Yeah,
Christopher Lloyd?
I've seen that the least amount of times, weirdly enough. But that's also a
But
delight.
that is oddly relevant to this because that movie is where Hulk Hogan met the Undertaker. He's actually one of the extras or like one of the space aliens in that movie. And then from there goes on to the WWE. So if you've seen
Interesting.
Suburban Commando and now 1990 Survivor Series, you have seen.
Are you sure
all
that's
all
the,
of the
the
debuts.
timeline? You researched that.
I'm pretty, or is it the other one? I could have
I think it's
sworn
the
from
other
what I
way.
heard.
It's the other way.
What's the other?
I mean, Suburban
So did
Commando
he get
came
Suburban
out in
Commando after? Yeah, because it is
1991.
after. But a film before then, right?
Maybe that's not a movie that hadn't had a lot of time to sort of gestate, but that's neither here nor there, right? But yes, because that was released about a year after this, and I don't think it required that much time. So I would look into that. To what you're saying, Dave, Hulk Hogan like discovered the cheat code for wrestling charisma. He had the body, right? He had this weirdly interesting look where like, and they talk about it. There's actually a great line in Always Sunny where they're like the silken hair of a Chinese man and the skin of a hot dog. Like he's
Right.
a interesting look. His hair clearly looks like a weird weave.
Yeah, and I'll give this to him. Like he seems like the best in. I don't know if he is, but he appears to be in good shape compared to everybody else.
He's in
Like
great
it
shape. Yeah.
feels like he invented the idea of what if wrestlers were healthy. That's what it feels like looking at everybody else. I felt scared for. Like everybody else, I was like, they all look 45 and they all look like they're about to have a heart attack. One of the biggest surprises I had is that Tugboat is still alive. When I saw
Did you
Tugboat,
research? Because we were going to play a game with you called Are They Still Alive?
That's so funny. That's the only one I researched because
Okay.
Tugboat is the only one that I looked at when that's a dead man. Like I just in my head, I was like, Tugboat's dead. He's got to be dead. And so he's the only one I Googled and I was like, wow, he's looking great. I'm like happy for him. Like
Yes.
he became like a little league coach. He just has like he just worked a regular job and he looks healthy and good. And I'm like, good for Tugboat. He was the person who I would have bet money on being dead. And so I am pleasantly surprised at Tugboat's fate.
Well, that's excellent.
Jeff, before you dive in, I'll do the classic thing I like doing on Nerd, which is Behind the Curtain. Jeff already mentioned we are in season 9 of Nerd, where we are doing holiday ghouls. Foolishly started that on Halloween because when you start on Halloween, everybody's like, yeah, of course, ghouls on Halloween. We're like, no, we got a theme. We're going to get to Christmas too, which is awesome. And the weird part of this for me, Dave, is 2 parts. I really wanted you on a guest. One is the reason we selected this is, as we mentioned, Jeff was there. He was there for Thanksgiving and amazing. They really want this to be a Thanksgiving Day tradition, Jeff. They really pushed that. So you were there.
They ended up stopping that.
But this is the episode, the season 4, I guess, of this pay-per-view. And they really want it to be Thanksgiving, which we will discuss in depth, I'm sure. Jeff was there, of course, being in Jeff's backyard. I always get a kick out of any time you folks from the Massachusetts area are nearby. Sometimes on the Gamefully Unemployed network. We didn't do plugs for your day, but that's where you can find Dave. Go look for Gamefully Unemployed. They're fantastic. A lot of stuff, and we will give you all of your accolades at the end. But like sometimes you and Jeff will be talking on podcasts on there, on movie nights. And because you are both from the Northeast nearby, it is hilarious to talk, to hear people in that area talk. We already having that when you were talking Boston. That was part of it. I was like, Jeff was there. It's in his backyard. Dave's back there. I get a delight. as you also noted over at Gamefully Unemployed, you have done some wrestling podcasts, which are a delight. And you had one of the best bits, and I want to paint you a picture of what happened. I was in a chess tournament. I'm a nerd. And in between rounds, I decided to get a walk-in and get some food. So the mall was right by where the chess tournament was taking place. I went and bought a banana, and I'm walking around the mall in the middle of winter. I think it was like February. So I'm eating the banana, walking in the mall, and you are doing one of your wrestling podcasts, and you just come up with wrestling gimmicks. And one of the gimmicks you had is, I believe her name was Mrs. Soupy. And you're like, she's just a
I do not
woman.
remember this.
You said she's just, oh, this is even better. So you get to hear this again. You get to feel the joy I felt hearing this new for the first time. So you said she's just a woman that wrestles, and she just spits soup at people.
That's a great idea. That's a great idea.
And so I'm walking in the mall eating a banana, and I start laughing hysterically because I'm listening to the podcast. I do it.
I don't like the great.
But anyway, so yeah, in the middle of February, there's this crazy man, looks worn and disheveled from playing chess, eating a banana in the Fox Valley Mall,
working in the
laughing
chess
hysterically. Yeah, and it's because of Mrs. Soupy. And I was just like, got to get this guy in a wrestling podcast. So that's the full confluence. Because it was funny when I pitched this to Jeff, I was like, we should do this. You've done that. Jeff's like, great. I was like, I'd love Dave to be on the episode. And he's like, you sure, Dave? And I'm like, no, Mrs. Soupy, Worcester, Massachusetts, all the stuff we'll hear about that. You had to be here. So I'm so glad you were able to make it.
I'm so glad to be here.
All right. So here's how the structure of this podcast changes a lot depending on the episode. Like the format is a lot different than say like a Tom and Jeff Watch Batman or a Fox Mulder is a Maniac, where you guys have established something in a very long time. Like, because we are jumping all over the world and spectrum of what this covers, this is going to be a very unique episode. We're actually going to go do like a very quick elimination process and then thoughts on each match. So I'm going to explain what the matches are.
Okay.
Right. So here's who the first match is, blah, 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 blah. All right. And then we'll be like, and let's talk about that. Right. Because there's a lot of information to sort of ascertain when, 7 people are getting, eliminated and stuff. But go ahead.
I have a question because you were there, Jeff. Just one, and I don't mean to skip ahead.
Yeah. Keep in mind, this was 34 years ago.
Okay. Well, this is something I feel like you'd remember. Were you concerned about the egg while you were there?
I was not so much concerned, but like any mystery box, you're always like, well, but what is it?
Yeah, I mean, scientists found a giant egg, like possibly a dinosaur egg.
Yeah.
And that's huge. That's like that this is, as far as I know, the first time in the 90s that we, like in humanity, we found a dinosaur egg, a viable dinosaur egg.
Yeah.
And they decided the best thing to do was to bring it to a WWF game in Hartford and put it on display and see what'll happen.
And also to bring it with them across the country.
Right. And they were like, we don't know what's going to happen to this egg. I'd be very concerned if I were there.
They built this up for months.
I didn't know that.
This was how long? Like,
I can't remember, but I mean, they were really building up the egg. And what we're going to find out, spoiler alert, it's considered like one of the darkest as far as story points go. Like one of the worst things the WWE has ever done. It has done worse things in like the real world, but in like the kayfabe world, this debut of the character that we will refer to as the Gobbledygooker, which I don't even like that name, was such a misfire on Vince McMahon's. Like, he thought that was going to be like their mascot, which is also insane.
Yeah. So what's in the egg, for people wondering, is cocaine. Cocaine's in the egg. Essentially,
via the man that is inside of the egg. Yes. Yeah,
because I didn't know that they were building this up for a while. I thought they were just like, and now we have an egg for this is our bit. Because boy, the fact that they apparently built it up, they do not pay off the egg.
No, it's like you can hear it too. We'll get into that because it's actually a very funny thing. But so we're going to take a look at match 1, and this is weird that this is match 1 because the team is the Warriors versus the Perfect Team. And the reason it's weird is because the champion is in the opening match. The Ultimate Warrior was the champion.
The Perfect Team is the one where in the Mortal Kombat selection screen where they're showing them.
Thank you.
They're the ones who it's three guys in a bondage mask and one guy who forgot his at home.
Yeah.
That's what I wrote, where I was like, why aren't they all? And then they don't come out. None of them come out in the bondage masks, right?
No, it's actually very funny. Oh, I forgot to mention that this starts with Vince McMahon destroying his vocal cords by announcing all of the people.
Is that who that is? I wrote, whoever this is sounds like Alex Jones. Okay.
Vince
Well, that's very
McMahon
fitting.
Vince McMahon, like his throat after this intro, like I've never heard anything that made me want to clear my throat more than shouting angrily and at the top of his lungs the name of every wrestler, right?
I feel like a lot of this is normal to you guys, but like one of the announcers appears to be a man dressed like the Penguin who's named Gorilla Monsoon.
Yeah, he's a he wrestled Muhammad Ali. That famous, like the famous boxer versus wrestler was Muhammad Ali.
Yeah, I recognize Roddy Piper, obviously, but it's stuff like that where I'm like, I guess this is normal.
Yes.
But I feel like I need an explanation.
Gorilla Monsoon. Okay. And actually, before we even start the matches, we can talk about the setup of this, because one of the big problems, because Gorilla Monsoon is considered one of the greatest ring announcers of all time. He's very good. Roddy Piper is quite literally a wild card in any place that you put him, including this.
Yeah.
Like he says some stuff where he realizes he fucked up kind of a lot. Also, they're both face announcers, meaning they both are rooting for the good guys, which is a massive mistake.
I noticed that because later there's like a guy that they hate, and then they have to do like commentary about how like, oh, he's trying to keep it together, he's trying to handle. It's like they're almost like sort of having to root for him a little bit.
Well, yeah, but also that man is
him.
Sergeant Slaughter that you're talking about.
They're so mad at him.
G.I. Joe's Sergeant Slaughter.
I can't wait to get to that, because I was very confused about the racism throughout all that.
You're confused about racism in...
It's more of like they felt confused about the racism, and like I couldn't tell which way the racism was supposed to go. We'll get to it. We'll get to it.
Have like Gorilla Monsoon and Bobby the Brain Heenan is considered like the absolute top of announcing teams, and I'd say right under it would probably be like Jim Ross and Jerry Lawler, who you might know from the Attitude Era, from the like Stone Cold Steve Austin.
I know from one of them from the Andy Kaufman documentary.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah.
So
and by God, the other one, you've definitely heard Jim Ross, all that voice every time. By God, he's broken him in half. God damn it, son of a bitch, right?
That's Kane's music. Yeah. But okay, the Warriors versus the Perfect Team. Now the Warriors, it's an interesting name because it's the Ultimate Warrior, Hawk and Animal, who are known as the Legion of Doom, and the Texas Tornado, Kerry Von Erich. All of these characters, even though it's based off of the Ultimate Warrior's specific name, have had wrestling names where they were the Warriors of some kind, right? Hawk and Animal were the Road Warriors, and Texas Tornado was some like the Texas Warrior or something like that. And then we have versus the Perfect Team. Mr. Perfect, who's one of my favorite wrestlers of all time. He's just absolutely wonderful. And then Demolition, Axe, Smash, and Crush. Important to note, this is Axe's last match in the WWF. The elimination results are relatively simple, right? So Axe is taken out. He's pinned by the Ultimate Warrior. That's the first thing. So one is gone. One of the bad guys is gone. And then Legion of Doom and the rest of Demolition are disqualified in a brawl. So the two bondage guys that are left and the two Legion of Doom guys with the face paint and they come in the red shoulder pads. They're eliminated because Legion of Doom refused to get eliminated naturally. And one of the things that's very funny about this pay-per-view and also very frustrating is how many not clean wins there are.
It felt very much like this is your typical standard missionary position, heel versus face wrestling, where it's like the heels had to win in a dishonorable way, and then so they could fight Hulk at the end.
But this isn't actually what happens in this match, because the faces, the good guys, one of the very good guys actually kicks a referee because they're trying to break up the brawl, and like these guys had heat together. So the ref is like, come on, guys, break it up. And like both members of both teams basically attacked the referee and say like, fuck off. And they're both eliminated. So in like a very short amount of time, you have 5 people eliminated. Now it's just Mr. Perfect versus the Ultimate Warrior and Texas Tornado. Texas Tornado and Mr. Perfect are enemies in this one, and Perfect pins the Texas Tornado with a perfect plex, which was his really great finishing pin. And then the Warrior pins Perfect, right? So the Ultimate Warrior survives. Surprise.
So I'm going to take a big step back and actually ask Dave if he's in a similar boat as me. This is hyper convoluted as a pay-per-view because wrestling, as most people know, is one of two things, either one-on-one fighting or tag teams, 2-on-2. And the rules for tag team is kind of nebulous, right? You like one person's out of the ring, one person's in the ring. If you slap their hands, you're allowed to do stuff. And then you also try and do like gimmicky stuff, interference. Where this gets crazy is these are 4-on-4 matches with tag team rules wherein some of the 4-on-4 teams are comprised of tag team teams. And this very first match is hilarious, Jeff, realizing after looking it up. But Axe, Smash, and Crush. In Demolition, Crush was like the replacement for Axe. So that is really hilarious because they had a tag team as a subsection of one of these 4 teams.
That was
and
3.
it's the tag team and the guy one of the people on the tag team is replacing. So these are really weird, convoluted 4-on-4s, like I said. In some cases, they are legitimate tag teams. In other cases, they just threw people together just because.
Yeah, that's normal back then, is that they would be like 2 solo wrestlers and a tag team would usually make up a.
I wrote down multiple times in my notes, I do not understand the rules of what I'm watching.
Neither do they.
So this was nice.
So neither do they. Actually, they're not consistent with their rule structure in this specific pay-per-view. And we actually will see that there are certain eliminations that happen to some people that should have happened to other people, but we'll get in that.
And the Survivor note, though, is basically you have 2 teams of 4. You kind of keep wrestling until only one team has survivors left. And then as you mentioned in the notes, Jeff, and I'm sure you're in the same boat as confused, Dave, at the very end, they just randomly combine all the survivors into 2 super survivor teams and fight for a grand championship. They don't explain why beyond being good guys, bad guys, which is just confusing. And they never do this again. Typically, this event is kind of the idea of, 2 teams versus each other, and whatever team outlasts the other team gets a survivor. But this is the rare one. Jeff, you chose an amazing one to go to. 2 other random notes. You did. This first appearance of Undertaker, first appearance of Gobbledygooker, who we'll get to.
Yeah, it's kind of one of the greatest and one of the worst moments in WWE.
Only time they did these rules at Survivor, which are just utterly baffling with the grand finale.
Yeah, because now they also now have to recognize that there are good guys and bad guys. Like they never actually officially say that there are good guys and bad guys, and yet somehow they all end up on the good guy team and the bad guy team. Like that was a mistake that I think they didn't realize, that they were showing their hand, that they recognize that there are faces and there are heels, but whatever.
And then, yeah, I was going to say is Roddy Piper. We already mentioned him a little bit. He was incredibly coked up in the intro. Absolutely loved that. And then final just note about this match that I didn't realize doing the IMDb searching. Dave, I appreciate that you didn't spoil this for yourself ahead of time and only looked up Tugboat.
Yeah.
But if you look up Texas Tornado, I didn't realize this. He's one of the Von Erichs. So that recent Zac Efron movie is all about that family. And he has a prosthetic foot. He actually lost a foot in a motorcycle accident, and he wrestles with a prosthetic foot, which I didn't realize. And then tragically, to spoil one of our possible future games, Jeff commits suicide in a few years. So that was a wild, just like find in the very opening match. But as Jeff mentioned, this one was kind of done to start off Ultimate Warrior, who is our current champion. And then you were going to explain, get back to kind of some of the logistics, why they started with Warrior, which is fun stuff to hear about.
They started with Warrior for 2 reasons. Number one, that dude gassed himself out straight to hell immediately. Not enough coke in the world to keep this man moving. The other one is they had to reapply face paint. So you'll notice that he has different colored face paint in the beginning, in the first match, and the final match. Now, Dave, time for us to play a game.
Okay.
I'm going to name team members from this first match. And you're going to need to tell me, and I'll describe them, okay? You're going to need to tell me if you think they are alive or not.
Okay.
The Ultimate Warrior.
Dead. He's got to be.
Very dead.
Yeah.
Okay. Road Warrior Hawk. That's the guy with the reverse mohawk, and he came out in the red shoulder pads with the spikes. He's the one that kicks the referee. He's like the good guy.
I'm going to say he's also dead.
Very dead. Animal, his partner. That's the guy with the actual mohawk, and he's got like the white and black and red face paint on.
He might be alive.
Nope. He is very dead.
Okay.
The Texas Tornado, Kerry Von Erich.
I just said that.
Mr. Perfect, the captain of the other team, the guy who's like the last surviving one. Blonde hair, kind of big guy wearing sort of fluorescent singlet.
I want to keep the dead streak going. Dead.
Okay, you're very correct. He is very dead.
Yeah. I think most of these guys are probably pretty dead.
So now we're getting to the guys that are dressed in the dominatrix outfits.
Yeah.
The guys that are in the S&M outfits. So you get Axe first. He's the shorter, beefier one that's eliminated first, and he's the one that I said has nice hair.
Dead.
He's alive, actually.
Oh, good for him.
He's alive. Good for him.
I
Right?
want them to be alive, for the record.
Yeah.
I want them all to be alive.
Also, my foster brother Dan's favorite wrestler, and I got an autograph for him in 2004.
Nice.
Next, Smash, Axe's longtime partner. He was the medium-sized guy with the longish hair in that group.
All right, I'll go with alive again.
He is alive, and also he
Nice.
seems like a very wholesome man, which
Aw.
is rare for wrestling.
Tell him I say hi.
And then Crush, the final one. He's the big, like the really tall brick house.
I'm gonna go ahead and kill Crush.
Well, you didn't have to because he already was dead. So we got that going for us. Okay. So there we go. So we have 2 living members of 8 men that were in this ring.
That's better than I thought.
1 in 4, basically. 25% survival rate.
Everyone that is deemed alive gives me hope as a person, if that makes sense, where I'm like, I want them to be alive because I see myself in a lot of them, and I also want to be alive. So I'm like, yeah, I would rather them all be alive.
Correct. This is a good place for you to be, and I love that for you.
Yeah.
Our next up, we have the $1 Million Team versus the Dream Team. This is the $1 Million Man Ted DiBiase versus Dusty Rhodes. They had a long feud ever since Dusty Rhodes came in. Dusty Rhodes, a famous like for the working man kind of guy. He has a very famous promo called the Hard Times promo, which is sort of it's in like the Wrestling Hall of Fame, that kind of promo, right? So the $1 Million Team, his team comprised of the Elvis guys, the Honky Tonk Man, and Greg the Hammer Valentine, as well as his secret mystery partner, the Undertaker, in his debut.
Yes.
And they are fighting Dusty's team, and that is Dusty Rhodes, the Birdman, Coco Beware, and then the tag team of Bret the Hitman Hart and Jim Neidhart, the Hart Foundation. What do we think about this fight?
Man. So Undertaker it's young Undertaker is very fascinating. He's kind of a little bit of a ginger, isn't he? Like he's not dyeing his hair. He's sort of doesn't have his bit fully done, so he's just kind of like this intense, serious guy. I like that they know they poochie him. Did you notice that? When he's not there, they say, "Where's Undertaker?"
Hey, just so you know, they literally poochied him at one point in time.
Oh, wow.
There's a point where he literally flies off into the sky.
It felt like we were just kind of waiting. Like it felt like this was all for him. Like they knew what they had. Like the announcers, like it was just funny to watch them be like, "Oh, look at this new guy, the Undertaker. Who's this guy?" And then he does the tombstone. They're like, "Yeah, that's the tombstone." And it's like, so this is all about
huge mistake. Yeah.
Yeah, it's all about his branding.
You can hear Gorilla Monsoon kind of realize that he fucked up when he said, "Oh, that's a tombstone." And he's just like, "I'm not supposed to know that."
Right. But I like, screw it, he should take credit to be like, I invented the name of that, like that's what it should be. But yeah, they're just so into him. I wrote down they said, look at the size of that ham hock. Check out those drumsticks, baby.
Roddy Piper really pushing that one. Yeah.
Yeah. That's something I've said about my cat. And then I also liked the comment, he doesn't look like he's having a good time. So they described him, which I thought was very funny way to describe the Undertaker.
I do like that when he's walking down and they're showing him, the energy that you get is the announcers like, Jesus Christ.
Yeah.
Like this guy is a friggin' monster. And
they know what they have.
Yeah, which is funny because, and we can give a little bit of backstory because this is kind of the point of us doing this episode. Mark Calloway, who is known as The Undertaker, was in WCW as a man named Mean Mark Calloway. And his thing was he was just a terrifying giant man. infamously, the booker for WCW, a very hated man named Ole Anderson, kind of looked at him and said, "You're never going to draw a dime. Like, you're not the kind of wrestler that people are going to pay to see." So he's like, "All right, man, I guess I'll go." And Ole Anderson's like, "That's fine." Well, wouldn't you know it, Vince McMahon's like, "We got something for you." The thing that I will add, because I know you were like, "Oh, he doesn't have his shtick down." Well, The Undertaker sort of has reinvented himself over periods of time. He nailed it here. He absolutely nailed it. And by the way, if you're pedantic, yes, I'm aware that he appeared on a house show before this. That doesn't count. It's not canon. He shows up and does exactly what he's going to do for like the next 3 years, which is be an absolutely terrifying monster that barely blinks and no sells everything because he doesn't feel pain. He can't die. He's like a zombie.
Well, who's the guys on his side? Who's the
$1 million
Elvises?
man, Ted DiBiase, and then the two Elvis guys. It really is just a smattering of people that don't belong together.
By the way, the Elvis guys was my least favorite theme because there's nothing scary about guys who are fans of something. There was just something about like, we're into Elvis, and I'm like, be your own thing. That's not scary for me. Yeah, that's scary for, I guess, Elvis to run into guys dressed like him. But like, I don't know. They just didn't have it. But like, there's just something generally funny about this idea of the Undertaker being like this like demon or something, and then it's just him and some guys.
Yeah, also though, it kind of seems like it would be like a tag team now that would come out and would be like, we're like Michael Jackson. And you're just like,
yeah.
why? I mean, I guess
Right.
Elvis impersonators are a thing. I mean, because originally, like, it was just the Honky Tonk Man. And Greg the Hammer Valentine, who is his partner, was just like an old hand wrestling guy, very reliable mid-carder, a very talented man, just a face. He had bitter beer face his whole life. He just he didn't have the face to really make it, which is just a sad thing to say. But he had a very admirable career, but they needed to find something to do with him. So they teamed him up with the Honky Tonk Man. They made him dye his hair black. I loved seeing him try to do an Elvis lip into the camera, and instead it just looks like he's having a stroke.
Right. It's very silly. It reminds me of like, family photos when one of the kids is a goth, where it's just like if you're gonna make him do this theme that he's like some demon or whatever, you need to he needs to hang out with other demons, right? Like it's like if the mob had like a djinn on their side.
Yeah.
Like it's just like what are they doing hanging out with this mystical creature?
I would say there's a few cool parts about this fight in terms of that. The Honky Tonk Man, Rhythm and Blues is their tag team name, by the way. So that's the point. Is it is like two singles mixed with the tag team. It was a shtick for the $1 Million Man to basically pay people to either fight for him, to give him their titles. So this idea that the $1 Million Man would have paid somehow the Undertaker to be on his team. And then for those other two, there's two parts. You kind of want red shirts, right? You're like, obviously, we want to see. I was wicked impressed. Ted DiBiase, I know him so much for his promo stills. I know him so much
one
for
of the greatest heels in history.
He's an amazing heel, and I've known him so much for his mic skills, for his talking that laugh, the $1 Million Man, everybody's got a price, turned into a preacher that did like fraud in real life. So
I think that was his son that technically did that.
Oh, okay. Anyway, but regardless, I knew him as that. But like this match, he was an amazing wrestler. Like him and Bret Hart put on like the best part. So it's like you have two stars. You have Ted DiBiase. You have the Undertaker. You want the Undertaker's debut. You want an amazing match. So you kind of have the red shirts. And then in an old school, almost carny fashion for how like these big shows would go is you got paid for being on the card. So sometimes we would have these like mismatches where you're like, that's not really a theme. And basically the Honky Tonk Man, the Rhythm and Blues team might have just been big enough to say, we will want to get paid for being there. And they're like, okay, well, we have 2 spots at table number 8. You're with the goth table.
Yeah, he's great. He is the $1 Million Man, and $1 Million Man and Bret Hart showed why they are where they are in the company. And in this fight, and the Undertaker showed that he belongs, right? So looking at the elimination results, Coco Beware is obliterated by the Undertaker in a tombstone pile driver that looks real. Like it looks like when he lands, he did not protect his head when he went down. He probably did. But like,
Yeah,
I remember
no.
watching that and just being like, oh, that actually does look like it really did do damage.
Yeah, I mean, all of wrestling is this for me, especially watching like newer wrestling with the older guys. Like, I mean, honestly, watching the last time I watched The Undertaker go when he showed back up, that was perilous for an entirely different reason because I'm watching a 60-year-old guy
Walk on the
land
ropes.
on or like land on his knees, and I'm just like, fuck God,
Yeah.
watch. Yeah, like no matter it doesn't matter how fake or real, it always scares me to watch. Because I'm just like, they're poor fucking bones.
Yeah, they still take damage. Like the amount of surgeries these men have to go through.
Yeah.
Wild. But yeah, Coco Beware obviously is the sacrificial lamb to the Undertaker, right? I also do like that the Undertaker's big move is choking the shit out of men.
Yes, he just chokes a guy at the end. I was like, that doesn't seem like an official move.
There's a part where he's on top of Bret Hart, like staring, like he's not even staring at Bret Hart. He's like staring off into the distance while he's murdering a man with his hands. It's really fun. The Honky Tonk Man is pinned by Jim the Anvil Neidhart. Jim the Anvil Neidhart was considered one of those very like rough men in real life that happened to be a wrestler, which I think is always really fun. He takes him out. Ted DiBiase immediately takes him out, right? DiBiase, just such a great heel because he always would like escape and try to do, but he was like, he represented like wealth and he represented privilege, but he also was just like really gritty and good at what he did. And so it's just like an extra way to hate this man, right? So Neidhart is pinned by DiBiase. Dusty Rhodes gets a flying clothesline from across the ring from the Undertaker, and he's pinned like pretty handily off of a clothesline. There's a lot like Jim Neidhart is taken out by Ted DiBiase from a clothesline. That's what gets the pin. It's like, oh, that's a pretty basic move to eliminate somebody on. As Brother Love, who is the manager of the Undertaker, is beating the Christ out of an eliminated Dusty Rhodes. Dusty Rhodes starts beating on Brother Love. Undertaker chases him down, is counted out. Somehow, you have to get him off the board, right? You have to get him off the board while still being invincible. This is how they do it. Roddy Piper calls him an idiot. He says he's really dumb, and Gorilla's like, maybe we shouldn't be calling him dumb. He probably just doesn't understand the rules because he's such a powerhouse. And he's like, yeah, he's not dumb.
Oh, yes, right. He does it a few times. He like keeps saying, he later says like, I told you this was dumb.
Yeah.
At a certain point.
He's like, he's a dummy. And it's like, Gorilla's like, well, he probably just doesn't know the rules because he's a zombie monster.
Right.
Doesn't know rules of things. He's just in to beat people.
I mean, the announcers, it's watching two people try to improv who have no business improvising. And it's
with an
always a
earpiece
delight.
in, and Vince McMahon on the other end being like, and now say this.
Right. It's improvising with a dude on cocaine screaming at you in one of your ears. That sounds like kind of sounds like a blast, honestly.
Greg Valentine is pinned by Bret Hart as everybody's like, Greg Valentine's still in this. And then Bret is finally pinned on a reversal by Ted DiBiase that is absolutely fantastic. Bret sits up and screams "fuck" in the middle of the ring, which is awesome. DiBiase versus Bret.
How odd! You were in the audience. Was that like audible? Because I was impressed by, because this is all filmed. I like took a slow-mo, and I'll have to put this clip actually like on Blue Sky or something. But yeah, he audibly says "fuck," and like the camera catches it all. Like the subtitles don't say it. You don't hear the audio, but he does it. And I mean, I'm going to have a lot to say about Bret Hart, but he was kind of one of the pinnacles of performers in this era and into the Attitude Era, where he was really about making the fights look real, making you feel invested. So it's like, yeah, this is make believe, this is pretend. Of course he knew the outcome because there's no way he's going to get reverse pinned because he was like a state champion wrestler in real life when he was younger.
So was Ted DiBiase.
Coming out with that emotion. What?
So
Ted DiBiase was as well.
Ted DiBiase was the AWA champion, by the way. He was a really legendary wrestler.
And even here, like I said, I have so much of my memory as him on the mics, and so much of what you see as clips is him speaking. Dave, I got to ask you, what is your familiarity with the Hart family, who Bret Hart is a member of?
Not very familiar. I know that there's like little empires, wrestling empires and stuff. Like I know those names, But it's one of those things where it's like maybe I know the ins and outs, but I honestly don't. Like if I don't associate those names with any information, I guess.
Oh, that makes, because I was just going to say, like, the Hart family is so legendary in wrestling, and they are so wild when you start digging into them. This included, did you catch in the middle of this match where they're randomly just like, oh, and rest in peace, his brother died yesterday?
His had died the day before.
No, that's wild.
That happened. And here's the other thing. One of his other brothers died doing a stunt coming into the ring. He was supposed to rappel down on a rope into the ring.
Wait,
That's Owen Hart. Yeah,
that happened
when
later,
we were
right?
watching.
Yeah, later.
That happened, I believe, in 1999.
Okay, I was gonna say I remember, that being a thing. Yeah.
Yeah. So that's his brother. But I'm saying he had another brother that got hit by a car when he was younger, which messed up his kidneys, and he died of kidney failure the day before this match. And so Brett, just for perspective, Brett's brother has just died. It's Thanksgiving, and he goes out and does that. And his family, just as a whole, is going to have curse after curse with family members, immediate family, married family dying. And then also just the Hart, like, at some point, look up the Hart Mansion and Stu Hart.
It doesn't sound like a very mysterious curse, is what I'm hearing. Like, it's
not very mysterious. It's a large family full of people in the wrestling business. Shit's gonna happen.
Right. And people who seem to have a very like toxic philosophy.
Yeah.
Like the fact that he's working on this during this, right? Like the fact that he's out there wrestling and they're like, by the way, his brother died or whatever, where it's like, then why is he there?
Well, okay. The reason he's there is because Bret Hart might be the most professional wrestler who ever lived.
Right.
And he very much is the show must go on guy. This is like the Super Bowl, after your dad. Like, you see that a lot where it's like, yes, something tragic happened, but you need to do the job.
I definitely get the idea of being like, I need to distract myself with work and stuff like that.
Yeah.
And it's not like, you could argue that what he's doing is not like he can still do while grieving. But considering the family history, I'm just like, I feel like these people might be pushing themselves too much.
Well, here's the thing. He's got to work for what, 15 minutes?
That's true.
And first off, that's a hell of a payday.
Probably got a couple $100,000 at this point in time, right? That would probably be the payoff for this match.
Yeah. But second off to that, like, this is the pinnacle of what their whole family builds to.
Right.
And what better way to, because it's all, it wasn't like a huge surprise, but what better way to honor the family than to put on the best show of the night, which they absolutely did. And that was actually a thing DiBiase and Brett, like, because they were friends, were like, we're going to make this the match of the night. And they did. That final time between Brett and Ted DiBiase is by far the best part of this whole thing. It's so good.
Yeah.
It shows why Ted DiBiase is such a great monster heel, like why he's such a great heel. And it also shows why Bret Hart deserves the accolades that will be coming to him once he enters singles wrestling. Because he was still in a tag team at this point in time. It's just super impressive. Like, best fight of the night by far.
For sure.
Undertaker is an impressive person to debut, but these men carried this fight.
Again, they don't even know what they have because he's barely in it.
Yeah.
Where I want more Undertaker. But it's like, it's because I know what he is.
It's a nice tease, though. They showed the stuff that he can end up doing, and he starts really building on that repertoire. But man, Brett and DiBiase, it's just such a great finish. They had to eliminate The Undertaker because you couldn't make him look weak, right? They had to find a way. It's an inconsistent rule. But yeah, it's just great. It's just very good. I can't get over how much I liked this. Like, if there's any match, if you're going to watch just one match, that's the match to watch, right?
Yeah, that and the egg. Watch the egg.
You've got to watch the egg, but for entirely different reasons. Like,
yeah.
So what'd you think of that fight? Yeah, more Undertaker you wanted?
I think you're right. It's the best fight of the night. This is the highlight. It's all disappointing from here. Although the next one's pretty fun too, actually.
Yeah.
But like it was just fun seeing a little baby Undertaker and seeing like, I had never seen his first match. And thinking about like first matches now, being like, man, now I kind of want to go back and watch a lot of first matches to just sort of see how they handled it and if they knew what they had or not.
No.
Because they definitely knew what they had here.
Time to play a game.
Yeah.
It's called Dead or Alive.
Ooh, what's the rules of the game?
You have
How
to
do I
tell me if
win?
this person is dead or alive, and if you win, then you will stay alive. Ted DiBiase, the $1 Million Man, dead or alive?
I want to say alive.
You would be correct. The Undertaker, that's an easy one. That's a gimme.
Yeah, he's alive.
He's alive. He just had fucking Trump on his podcast.
Yeah.
The Honky Tonk Man, that's Elvis impersonator #1 with the red pants.
Dead?
Alive.
Ah, all right.
Yeah, look at that. He
Alive and
actually
real
is
salty.
still alive. And probably with the same color hair, because that was probably never natural. That
No.
shoe polish black hair. Greg the Hammer Valentine, the other Elvis impersonator.
I'm just going to try dead again.
He's alive.
Wow, the hammers.
That's a surprise to me. Huge.
Hammers are alive. Yeah.
The Dream Team, the American Dream, Dusty Road.
I honestly don't know. I'm going to say alive.
He is very dead.
Oh,
And that more age, like how late did he live? Only 69. He was young.
But his children are also very successful. A lot.
I've seen them. Yeah. I've
Cody
seen them
Rhodes,
wrestle.
the most dominant one, and then Gold Dust was his son Dustin. Coco Beware, the Birdman, the man who is tombstone straight to hell, alive.
Jesus Christ. I'm not doing well this time.
This match is absurd. This makes no sense. This is an anomalous match. Like this is like throwing a perfect game or something. To have like
only one dead man at this point.
Again, I'm happy, but I'm
Wait, no, do we have any? Oh yeah, Dusty Rhodes. Bret
Hart.
Hart.
Yeah.
Wait, is he dead?
I'm asking you. That's what I asked.
Alive?
He is alive. Just ask
Right.
Bill Goldberg. He will tell you how much he hates him at all times. And finally, Jim the Anvil Neidhart. That's the big guy in the pink with the goatee. The guy that if you saw in a bar, you're like, I should leave.
He felt dead to me.
He is dead.
Okay.
He is dead. Although his daughter was also a famous superstar in the WWE.
Ooh, good for her.
Yeah, good for her.
Yeah.
He lived
Match
long.
3.
Looking that up, Jeff, now, I'm really enjoying the dead or alive part of this match. Looking that up, Neidhart lived longer than I would expect. That's 2018.
Yeah, because he didn't die
So,
right after this match. Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
A lot of these guys, they're like expensive dogs where you're like, they're fun to look at and I don't expect them to live very long. Like, that's just how I see a lot of these guys.
Yeah, they have bred dog energy. Yeah.
Yeah, they do. They're made to wrestle.
Yeah,
And
you're
it's
right.
like,
Their hip joints go out real early.
Yeah, they can't breathe well.
That's the best way to that you could possibly put it. So match 3 is actually delightful. It's another very good match. And it is the Visionaries versus the Vipers. Now, it's important to note, and they do talk about it a little bit, that Jake the Snake Roberts was, quote unquote, blinded by the model. That's why the team is named the Visionaries. Because they are literally rubbing it in his eye. They're like rubbing it in his face. The model Rick Martel, just a perfect mid-card villain, great heel. He's like talented and great and French, and which, well, I mean, he's from Montreal, or from Quebec, and you could hear, but he's also like, he's a beautiful man. He's in perfect shape. He's cocky. Like, he's just so fucking hateable. He's perfect. He's a perfect wrestler. So that's Rick Martel, the model Rick, the Warlord, who I didn't realize is the scariest man I've ever seen in my life. Hercules.
He's the one with the magic wand. You found him scary?
When he took the magic wand and armor off.
That's
Did you
fair.
look at that, man?
Him coming out with the fucking magic wand with a W. It was just like all I could think is like, who made him that? Did he go out and get that custom made for him?
Yeah.
Like, did he use his own money? Probably.
It's a couple, like, the gimmick was probably created for him. And it's like 1 degree away from being steampunk.
Yeah,
like,
it's not quite Warlord,
Yeah. Well, I think he's like a futuristic warlord. I think that's his whole thing. Is that, that's it. Like, he's like a Mad Maxy kind of warlord.
Right.
And then we get Hercules and Paul Roma, who were known as Power and Glory. Hercules Hernandez, just another just massively jacked dude. Like the Warlord and Hercules are the most muscular men I have ever seen. They're like so huge in this. And they are fighting Jake the Snake Roberts, Superfly Jimmy Snuka, famous murderer, Shawn
Wait, really?
Michaels, and Marty Jannetty. Oh, yeah, he for sure killed. I mean,
Damn it.
I think
That's
legally,
the guy out of all of this that was like, that's the guy I want to hang with. I'm going to bet it all on Jimmy Snuka. Murder.
Yeah, Dave. One of my favorite wrestlers I've actually met is Mick Foley, who's just amazing. Mankind, you know.
Yeah.
Huge name in the Attitude Era and one of the nicest people. Like, he's a fascinating tale because Mick Foley had no business being a wrestler and it's somehow one of the most prolific wrestlers. And his origin story is he got to see Jimmy Superfly Snuka at the Garden and was like, I want to do that. Apparently, if you're like super nice guys, because you and Mick Foley, I put in this weird category of like nice, amazingly talented entertainers. Like for some odd reason, I could see you two being a tag team. You go with the cop, Jeff. Anyway, Dave and Mick Foley, I put together in a category of like awesome, amazingly nice, incredibly talented entertainers who happen to like murderers like Snuka versus Jeff, who I equate with Boston cops. Anyway, back to the match.
Okay.
We got Snuka, and then we got
the
Jannetty
Rockers,
and
Shawn Michaels and Marty.
Who's the swole baby?
What do you mean the swole baby? What do you mean?
Which one? There was a swole baby in this.
Is that the one you're talking about, the Warlord?
I don't think it's Warlord. It's the guy who's like, I think he had just a goatee. He had no gimmick from what he was just like the black underpants. Just
I think that's the Warlord. That's the same guy that came out in the.
Oh, okay. So
like
you're right.
He's the one that like
scary.
is just swiping people out of the way.
Yeah, you're right. Once they take that shit off of him, he just looks like a big muscle.
He looks like a stack of bowling balls.
He had no neck.
No, like I was like watching this and I'm like, even as a kid, I was like, how was I thinking Hulk Hogan was the biggest dude? You look at Warlord and you're like, that is the biggest man muscularly I've ever seen.
The one I'm most scared of though is Jake the Snake, like because he's a dude with a hobo sack, like a bindle with a snake in it, which I felt so scared and so bad for the snake throughout all of this.
Always a different snake. Don't worry.
I assumed it's a different, heavily sedated snake.
He puts them in the refrigerator.
Around.
He like fridges them. He makes them cold.
See, I felt so bad for them. They're living in their own dystopian hellhole here.
It's important to note, Dave, and I don't mean to interrupt. It's important to note that during Jake the Snake's he's had a very dark life, right? One of the things that was dark is that he was charged with animal abuse and cruelty because the snakes were just very not treated very well. And you are right. It was actually one of the jokes I was going to make is that Warlord is the most physically terrifying person in this match, but Jake Roberts is the most generally terrifying man in this match.
Yes, because he feels like he's going to take out a gun.
He looks like he has a gun. I was just going to say he looks like he has a gun.
Who's the guy? He's a new wrestler. He has a beard. He comes out. He usually has like a fucking white t-shirt on.
You mean now or in this?
Now, or I think he's still around.
You mean like Daniel Bryan?
Daniel Bryan. I put him in this other slot because he looks like Jim Henson and he comes out in a white t-shirt and like wrestling shorts, but he just looks like a guy with no pants on. Like he just looks like a guy with a white shirt and no pants who looks like Jim Henson. And I'm like, I don't want to wrestle that man. Yeah, I have no desire for that man to put his hands around me. Is he the most powerful or strong guy? No. I just feel like he's going to pull my tongue out or something like that.
Yeah, and Jake the Snake would and probably has done that. We take a look at the elimination results. Marty Jannetty, who we could do a whole podcast about him, is absolutely shithoused by the Warlord after trying to get a little too cute with the aerial stuff. And eventually, like the Warlord, they do this thing where they like, you know, the Warlord's like, oh, you almost knocked me down. And then he just absolutely murders Marty Jannetty. Marty Jannetty was supposed to have a great run in the WWE, and he could not get out of his own way. And that is a continuing story that goes to this very day, that this man cannot get out of his own way. He is one of the greatest people to follow on social media for all of the worst reasons.
Oh, I remember that. Sorry to actually jump because didn't you retweet this or something, Jeff? I'm reading the Wikipedia, and you're like, nothing like watching a guy just admit to murdering a person, and that made it to his Wikipedia. Or just like randomly.
Marty Jannetty admitted, or at least claimed, that he murdered a gay man in the 70s. when he was a teenager.
Damn.
It just like does that on
For
social
hitting
media
on him and trying to molest him. And everyone's like, what? He's like, no, I was kidding. And we're like, you what?
So he's got like grandpa on deathbed energy.
Yeah, but also he did a post about how he wanted to fuck this girl, but he thought she was his daughter, and then they took a DNA test and she isn't.
So yeah, grandpa on deathbed energy.
He's a very hideous man who could not get out of his own way. Drugs clearly were a problem. Also, it's important to note that their first interview is in the shower before
Yes,
this
I'm
match.
glad you mentioned this. He's showering with the snake. And that
Yes.
was the moment I felt bad for the snake, but I also like
That's the only time you should have felt good for the snake.
Yeah, that's true.
And also, I cannot imagine how much drugs were coursing through the veins of the people being interviewed in that shower. Because every one of those men is or was a terrifying drug addict at the time.
Damn.
Yeah.
Your Marty Jannetty point is huge to that point because like his partners with Shawn Michaels, and it is wild to be in the 90s and you're partners with Shawn Michaels and you are the problem one because Shawn Michaels, huge attitude era, you probably knew Generation X, right, Dave? But like just his backstory being just like a huge problem, lots of drugs, big fight with Bret Hart, one of the most infamous. And then that the Vipers team, they have all the drugs, Jeff. That's all of them. There are no drugs left.
Yes.
I mean,
The
it's a
Vipers
guy with
took
a
all the
snake.
drugs. Yeah.
They're gonna have drugs.
So
no, all the drugs though. I want that clear. It's all the drugs.
All of the drugs. All of the drugs. So now this is one of those things too, where when you look at this fight, like it's clear that this team is working, the heel team is working very well at being heels that are getting wins. So like Jimmy Snuka is rolled up by the model Rick Martel, grabbed by the tights, but whatever. Shawn Michaels eats Power and Glory's finisher. Also, Shawn Michaels is like really buff. And I remember him like really kind of slimming down, or they just had bigger men, but like he's really kind of like thick, muscular, which is not how he was during the later era.
Well, they're probably steroids though. Probably after the steroid scandal, all
bit.
the smaller ones probably stopped taking steroids.
He eats Power and Glory's finisher and is pinned by Paul Roma. Jake is counted out after chasing down the model, who also is not counted out, even though the Undertaker was counted out in the same way.
Yeah, it's bad. It's bad sports.
Yeah,
it's I don't know. They need to rethink things when you're being like disqualifying a man for chasing another man with a snake. Like you've lost control of your sport. That's all.
People are saying
The model
get a
has like an old school 1930s 40s canister for cologne. That's what. And then it says what?
It's like a DEET sprayer. Yeah.
And it says what? Arrogance on it, right?
Yeah. It really went out of control. It was.
Yeah. He attacks Jake with an arrogance perfume, whatever. And then he chases it with a snake. And you're like, oh, this is wrestling.
These were the people I was thinking of where it was like the heel win, where it felt like they wanted to not win honorably. And like, so like everything is like this weird, it's like this series of misunderstandings where someone has to chase someone with a snake after being blinded.
Yeah. And they really built that up with like the Jake the Snake. Like this feud is actually really, it was long going, and like the bit where like the model would never get tagged in, and he would like whenever Jake would get in, he'd escape. Like he was being really slippery and getting away from Jake the Snake.
Yeah.
Which is why Jake chased Rick Martel down, eliminating himself, because Jake also he's a bit of a hero at this point in time. He's hugely over, which is fascinating who they love. When you look at like the people that they truly love, the wrestlers, and if you know who they are as actual people, you're like, you guys are way off. Hulk Hogan, the Ultimate Warrior, Jake the Snake, these are the people you love, buddy.
You're doing definitely Casey Jones at the end of Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles. Like that who you're going for?
Yeah, this here and that down there is a family. The Visionaries survive, right? And in my notes, I wrote, I've never appreciated how absolutely horrifying the Warlord was as a human. He might be the scariest man I've ever seen. Hercules is also terrifying. Warlord ended up being a bodyguard for people like 50 Cent and Kimbo Slice. So like, that's interesting. So we have that going. Dave, thoughts on this one beyond what you just said?
No, I wrote down something the announcer said that was not really about this, was just the quote, "It's getting real serious, Gorilla." It just
That's a funny combination of words.
It is. It really is. I like the hype man for the Visionaries. I think he did a good job.
Oh, Slick.
Yeah, I
Dr.
like
style.
their
Heel managers
heel-ness.
are great.
Yeah, heel managers are really fun.
Yeah, I didn't play the heel manager aspects of them. They are important. Bobby Heenan and Mr. Fuji were there.
Yeah.
Were there in the first one. Virgil, Brother Love, and Jimmy Mouth of the South Heart were in the second one. And we have Slick on this one. Yeah.
Oh, yeah. I forgot to, in my notes, bring this up. I thought you'd appreciate this, Dave. But Mr. Fuji, do you want to know one of his moves, both as a wrestler and a manager?
Sure.
He just threw salt in people's face. He was famous. His Wikipedia article says he's famous throwing salt in people's face. That's his gimmick.
Pretty
He
cool.
throws salt in people's
Good
face.
on him.
He is.
But he didn't do that, of course, in the first match. I think it was just a lot of the managers in this fight, in this pay-per-view, felt like paydays. Like Bobby Heenan's on the corner, you give him one thing and then he's off and, he gets paid. I did love the end. Jeff, you and I have been we're talking rules before the show. And like my stat head one is because the model and Jake the Snake were out at the same time and both got DQ'd. Jake gets DQ'd first, ending the match, which is why the model comes back. And this would be important if they explained what the hell was going on. I'm very glad that you gave me validation, Dave, that like they don't explain the rules, but in the end, when it turns out all four of them survive, which is the first time in Survivor Series, that's huge for Ted DiBiase having, that gives him a 5-on-3 edge. So that was the only, like, for our very end to make the villains look intimidating, to have 5 versus 3. That was the only way for it to happen. I kind of give it to you, but nobody explained it. And if they did give those rules to Roddy Piper, like he was talking something else, like talking about Turkey or calling Saddam Hussein an elephant or something, which he does do earlier.
There's lots of jingoism. Because remember the Gulf War just started. And
Yes, that's a whole thing in this.
That's going to be after the next match. We'll talk about that where it's really big. Now, Dave, I would love to play a game with you.
What's the game?
It's called Is This Person Alive or Dead?
Oh.
I'm going to ask.
What's the rules?
I'm a person, and you're going to tell me if you think they're alive or dead. First, we're going to start with the Visionaries team. The model Rick Martel.
Dead.
He is alive.
Damn it.
He's alive. He's really good at escaping stuff. The Warlord, the giant muscular baby.
Okay, he's got to be dead, right?
Somehow still alive. I was shocked. I was shocked.
Okay.
Hercules Hernandez, the other massively jacked dude that was wearing a belly shirt, cut off belly shirt, sweatshirt.
All right, alive, I guess.
Dead.
I'm
Hercules
so off of
died.
this groove.
Died. I know. Paul Roma, the pretty boy that was wearing the cutoffs.
Alive.
He is alive. Very good.
Woo!
Jake the Snake Roberts.
I genuinely don't know what happened to him. I'm gonna say the snake itself definitely dead.
Multiple snakes are dead. Yes.
Yeah, I'm gonna say him too.
Somehow, against all odds, this man has survived. He should be dead.
Yeah, I don't like wishing harm on people, but I think it would only be fitting if he was killed by a snake at some point.
To be fair, he might be the most famous drug addict in the history of wrestling. He was horrifyingly abused by his father in all of the ways you could imagine. His father was an absolute monster. Do you ever watch Dark Side of the Ring? There's a good one about his family that's just really horrifying. He's a redemption story. He is absolutely a story of redemption. And it's
Okay.
He also cut me off at the omelet bar at the Hyatt McCormick in Chicago in 2013.
I'm going to choose to interpret that, Jeff, as Jake the Snake was running the omelet bar and Jeff, who loves eggs, had eaten like 10 omelets. And Jake the Snake was like, you've had enough. You're like, I'll tell you when I've had enough. And he's like, hey, brother, I'll get you into DDT yoga and it helped me.
He was with DDP. Yeah. Jimmy Superfly Snuka.
Dead?
Yes, he died at 73, which is way too late for him.
I was about to say, I was predicting he'd die like minutes after this match.
Yeah.
But all right.
Shawn Michaels.
I think is he dead?
He is alive, but one of his eyes is dead.
Okay.
And Marty Jannetty.
I'm going with my dead streak. Dead. They're all
somehow
dead.
alive. All of the members of the Vipers team should be dead.
Yeah. I figured one of them was going to be.
Jimmy Snuka is, but he died of old age.
Right. See,
he died at 73.
Yeah, I don't accept that.
Yeah. Right when he was about to have to face the repercussions of murdering somebody 30 years prior.
Right.
Anyway, that the Vipers should all be dead. It is unbelievable that 3 of the 4 are still alive. So now we're going to work our way on to match 4, which is the Hulkamaniacs versus the Natural Disasters. This is the most absolutely predictable fight that you could possibly imagine. At one point in time during the interview, Hulk Hogan volunteers to send his whole team to war for George Bush, which is an interesting promo. Where
Yes,
he's like,
that was
you want some extra
amazing.
muscle? Let me know.
Because I was thinking about his friends being like, dude, what the hell? Like, don't volunteer us.
Yeah.
And then I wrote, like, obviously, what if they did it? What if Bush
so great,
was
right?
like, all right, let's bring him. Yeah, he's out there. I know this is like just something he does, but he does like Adam Sandler hands when he talks.
He does.
Yeah, like his bones are trying to escape his hands.
He looks like he's doing the pee-pee dance.
Yeah.
When he's talking, like he's sticking his ass out a little bit. He's kind of hopping around, trying to cut the promo. It's really great. Jim Duggan's 2x4 is covered in yellow ribbons. It was a very patriotic time. It's the most patriotic time of the 90s, that's for sure. 2001 is going to, uproot that. But so the team is Hulk Hogan with Hacksaw Jim Duggan, the Big Boss Man, and Tugboat, who was dressed like a sea captain.
Tugboat was my favorite. Tugboat was hands down my favorite of the night, because this is a theme that I can get behind, where it's just like, I'm going to be like a big tough guy. And he's like, I'm Tugboat guy. Like he's going to the library. He's researching boating. I assume like there's no internet. So he can't be on Wikipedia. He's like committing to being
books.
Tugboat.
He went to Walden Books and got about
and like, and like got into tugboats. This was where the racism started coming in, where I was like, while watching this, I realized, I'm supposed to be rooting for the cop. Like, the cop fighting the guy called Barbarian, the dark-skinned man called Barbarian that the cop's beating. And I'm just like, man, I don't feel good about any of this.
Actually, this is filled with a lot of terrifying men. This match specifically, both from there are stories of like Jim Duggan clearing out bars of people in brawls, like just being a big, massive man. Tugboat is a giant. Earthquake, a sumo champion in Japan. Haku is considered the most terrifying man in wrestling. The stories about Haku are wild. Dino Bravo, I'll tell you more about him at the end. And the Barbarian, who was just considered like an absolutely terrifying man. Like
he was awesome.
He's so powerful.
Tugboat versus Earthquake, I enjoyed it was a brief moment where those two were, and I would say it's the least athletic moment in the history of wrestling. Like they neither seemed to have a grip on the situation.
Yes. Although it's important to note too that Earthquake was a world-class athlete.
They're like not in sync. Like when they're just, every now and then they'll just not be in sync, and you're like,
well, yeah,
it's like when you like hold the door open for someone and it's awkward. Like there's every now and then a moment like that.
Yeah, Earthquake had to wrestle with a bandage over his arm because he had a tiger tattoo, and that represented Yakuza shit. But he was a champion sumo wrestler. He was like considered one of the best living sumo wrestlers. So elimination results. Haku pinned by the Big Boss Man. Haku is the equivalent, the absolute perfect way to describe this guy is that he's a ham and egger. He's not technically a jobber, but just one of these guys that knows that this is how he's going to pay his bills and he's going to do whatever it takes, right? So he's pinned by the Big Boss Man. Jim Duggan eliminates himself by being an absolute spaz with his 2x4 and swinging it and beating people with it in the ring. He's played, and I don't know how much of this is a bit, but he's played like he would have been in the resource room in school, if that makes sense. Like, not necessarily mentally handicapped, but
yeah. I mean, this feels like a long-running wrestling tradition.
Yeah.
It's like the guys who are just like, a little off, a little touched.
Dino Bravo, who is billed as the world's strongest man, is pinned by Hulk Hogan. The Big Boss Man is pinned by Earthquake. Tugboat and Earthquake are double counted out. And side note, they are also future tag team partners. Tugboat will change his name to Typhoon, and they will be the Natural Disasters. And then Barbarian is finally pinned by Hogan. Hogan survives, obviously.
Yeah.
This is like the very patriotic, like Hulk Hogan really being like, we're real Americans, bro. You know, it's that.
Yeah.
But like a couple of things. First off, Earthquake is also considered the nicest man who ever wrestled. Like nobody has ever had a bad thing to say about him that worked in the business. And
Oh.
being a heel broke his heart.
Aw.
Like
You'd think they'd enjoy being heels, but I guess not.
he loved kids. Like he
Right.
was
So
just
he's
a
getting
good
spit on
man.
by kids.
He
Yeah.
was just a good, gentle, kind man.
Yeah.
And so having children be terrified of him at airports and stuff like that broke his heart.
Right.
Notes about this fight, folks, other than the fact that Hulk Hogan is not good.
I mean, yeah, on that note, I'm a huge sports buff. I probably shows up like in the Gamefully chat. I know I'm the basketball guy. So again, just doing the mid-card shout out to Gamefully Unemployed, where you can watch movies with cool people like Dave and Jeff on Friday nights. It's a blast. I'm gonna say, Dave, I'm gonna recommend Survivor Series 1990. Would be a fun watch at some. What I was gonna say is I like basketball, and if we talk like old school basketball, when you watch older stuff that's like from the glory eras, from like Magic Johnson or Michael Jordan, just how often it is so much worse than it is now. People are like, oh, things are better. And yeah, there are some amazing clips from the 90s, but if you watch all of the 90s, you'll just be like, oh my goodness, what is this? And this wrestling feels
Why
like
are those people doing defense? That's not basketball.
they're not doing defense. Like their defenses, they just miss. They like run in circles and miss. And then, yeah, there is some stuff there. But people are just bad. And like wrestling's a lot the same. A lot of this stuff in some of my notes, they'd be like the killer finishers, the DDT from like Jake Roberts and stuff. They're like, oh my God. And I'd watch it and I just be like, okay, that's quaint. And the same thing, like Hulk Hogan's like the pinnacle of 80s and 90s wrestling. And his leg drop is just laughable.
But it's pageantry. It doesn't matter.
pageantry.
It doesn't matter how laughable it is because you believe that it's effective.
Believe that's the key. That's what I'm
Yeah.
saying. That's the key point is like that has been a change.
I
And the
I
other
always
note-
thought too that the big boot was really the damage, not the leg drop. Whenever he would do that, because like he would throw people up, he'd throw people against the ropes and bring his foot into their face. I always thought like, well, the leg drop's really just the cherry on the sundae of the absolute ass kicking that they just ate a size 16 shoe.
It's like
That's
wondering
fair.
what part of snapping makes the noise.
Right.
Where you're like,
the
it's a
finger
few
hitting.
components. Yeah. I mean, it with wrestling, it's always been it's like a Rube Goldberg every move where they're just like slapping the floor and I'm just like, I don't know what part is supposed to be the part that hurts in any of
Sometimes
this.
it's very clear. Sometimes somebody will like drop a knee on an asshole. And you're just
Yeah,
like, well, I
yeah,
can
yeah,
understand how an atomic
But
drop
they're-
would ruin someone's life. Yes.
And their reactions, like every now, like whenever they spasm, I'm like, oh, I guess it's supposed to hurt their back. Like it's stuff like that where they'll like slam them on supposedly their head,
Yeah.
and then they'll like grab their back, and I'm like, I thought that was supposed to murder them. not
there's
hurt their
also, like,
back, but
There's a
all right.
point. There's a point where like the Warlord does a back body drop on Shawn Michaels a couple of matches ago, where Shawn Michaels goes legit like 13 feet in the air and lands flat on his back. And you're like, I know this isn't real, but there's a 0% chance that doesn't hurt. Like,
Oh yeah, that shit's great. Yeah.
And then the only other note I had on this one about the Barbarian is we did an episode on WMAC Masters, and I kind of laughed at that, where you'd have these people that would come out in ridiculous costumes. One of the guys is dressed like a cyborg. His name is The Machine. And then they take it all off. And I was kind of laughing. And it is funny because wrestling was one of the things that inspired WMAC. And you see the same things here, right? A couple ago, the guy with the face mask, taking it off that turns into a giant baby. In this case, the Barbarian who comes out with like antlers.
yeah,
that's
he's
cool.
basically like a Visigoth or some shit.
Yeah.
Like,
Yeah.
Yeah, so they'll like come out in a weird costume to look like something and then take it all off to just wrestle as a big guy. It's like, yeah, I'm like, yeah, works.
yep, yes, yeah. Hey, Dave, I would like to play a little game with you.
Yeah.
It's called Is This Man Dead?
Okay. What are the rules?
The rules are I'm going to ask you if this man is dead, and you are going to tell me yes or no.
Okay.
Okay. Hulk Hogan.
He's dead to me.
He is dead to all of
Oh.
us, yes, but unfortunately, he is still alive.
Yeah.
Hacksaw Jim Duggan.
Alive.
Alive, and one of my Facebook friends,
Aw.
just because I thought that would be fun. The Big Boss Man, the cop.
Dead?
Very dead.
Okay.
Yes. Tugboat.
I know this. He's alive, baby.
Alive. Tugboat is alive.
Tugboat?
Earthquake. The cop.
Dead?
Very dead. Yes.
Yeah.
Haku.
Alive.
Alive. Very good. Yes. The Barbarian.
Alive?
Alive is correct.
He looked like he
Yes.
took care of himself.
Yeah.
He was one of the people where I'm like, that's just like a fit guy. Like he just,
I think at that time he was considered, he had the strongest bench press
good for him.
at that time. Yeah, like he was just so fun.
Like you can tell the ones that are just like eating McDonald's every day and like taking steroids, and then the ones that are like, no, I'm like paying attention to what I eat.
Well, there are some men that are just massive.
Yeah.
Like some men are just huge and they're like, all right, what can I do with this?
Yeah.
Dino Bravo, Canada's strongest man, billed as the world's strongest man. He had powder blue trunks,
Dead.
blonde guy. He had like ramen hair.
Dead.
Not only is he dead, he was murdered execution style by the Canadian mob for smuggling cigarettes into the country.
That is such a Canadian mob way to like reason to murder somebody.
Yep. He was killed while, I believe, watching a Toronto Maple Leafs game.
Wow.
Yes. Yeah. That is probably the most interesting of the dead ones.
Yeah.
Dave's learning the live dead game really well.
You're figuring it out, I think.
I had put the producer break originally before the final match, but we've been going a while. We have producers for this show. So if you head over to patreon.com/Jeff May, you can produce shows like this. You can have Jeff send cards to you in the mail. If all goes as planned, Dave, I will get Jeff some cards. I'm still trying to figure out which ones that hopefully, if timing allows, you two can break together. Because here on the Nerd Show, we give parting gifts to our guests. And those come in the form of tradable cards to break. And I want to see what Jeff can think of for you, because you have so many amazing podcasts. You do so many things. There's easy ones. There's like X-Files. There's, Star Trek, which Jeff has done. But I want to see if Jeff
there's
can come up
lots
with
of
something wild.
WWE, there's Star Trek, there's X-Files, there's lots of stuff we could do.
Yeah. So we'll come up with that. So Jeff will send cards to you in the mail, sometimes with guests. Jeff will break up. But again, to make all of that wonderful stuff happen, head over to patreon.com/Jeff May, where similar to other podcast networks, we have producers, including this show. And Jeff, we got a new one this week, so I'm going to read this one out. Hey, Jeff here. Let me introduce the producer name.
Nope.
Oh, wait, what? That's not for me?
You can't say that.
Are you sure? But
you're not.
I think that was for me.
Hey, Jeff here. Let me interrupt the producer names real quick to say the only thing I love more than a hot, steamy bowl of mashed potatoes is a soggy-ass brioche bun to dip it in. Thanks, guys. A big shout out to Burrito, my best friend.
Woo.
A big shout out to the enchanted, wandering, unpierced left nipple cider served at room temperature, although that might also be an adjusted name, because it might actually be the Jolly Holly Christmas Fool's wandering, unpierced left nipple cider served at room temperature. Fa la 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 la. Yeah. Shout out to Norm from Cheers.
Norm.
And shout out to, I'm going to start calling Yoda Old Grogu just to see what happens. Dre, what do you got?
Right. I got drinkfrommikeslater.com. Every time Dre plugs the back catalog, man, some of those producer names are getting back catalog-y too. So if you do that, you are drunk. Also, shout out to Mike Slater, who did the theme song for I Must Break You, Jeff's show, where he opens cards at Jeff Has Cool Cards, Wednesdays, 1 p.m. Pacific time or 3 p.m. Central time, the best time zone. All right, we got Bimmy and Jimmy out fighting crime, which I will amend to Hulk Hogan and the Ultimate Warrior out fighting crime. For this episode, Ricky Cilantro, Dan's Ninja Turtle Ooze, and of course, Porcelain Jesus. Thank you all again. Patreon.com/Jeff May. If you want to be a producer, cards sent to you in the mail, ask for other podcasts, everything. Just patreon.com/Jeff May. Jeff, it is wild. We've been going a bit. We have said some wild stuff. I can't believe looking at the next three things. I think the next match and the intermission may be the wildest thing.
So the next three things are actually insane. And they're weird because match 5 is the Alliance versus the Mercenaries. And the Alliance is basically a group of people that aren't white Americans fighting a bunch of people that are like foreigners. So the Mercenaries are Sergeant Slaughter, Boris Zhukov, who is replacing Akeem the African Dream. Don't ask. Yes, he was white. Sato and Tanaka, who were, although I believe it was actually Kato.
This is the one where
Right?
I was
no, it was
like,
Sato. Yeah, it was.
I wasn't sure where the racism was gonna go. And
Yes.
so like there might have been set up for this, but they were like, all right, here comes, like they said, two people the Orient Express was somebody,
Yes.
and then there was Russians, and I was like, okay, I'm pretty sure I know how the racism is gonna go with this. And then Sergeant Slaughter, and I'm like, okay, well, he's the military. And then he comes out with like a Middle Eastern stereotype, and he's like, actually, I hate America, and everybody's mad at him. And I was like, okay, wait, hold on. Like, which stereotype are we rooting for? Which are we not? Which way are we directing the racism? It felt like it was a scatter shot. It was every direction.
Yeah, there's a lot going on here.
It's just the battle of the caricatures, the battle of the racist caricatures.
Yeah, it's like a whole thing. General Adnan, Sergeant Slaughter he's a villain. Now remember, the Gulf War starts, and the WWE is not known for being tasteful or having tact. So they turn Sergeant Slaughter, a famous American patriot, right? He's a G.I. Joe character for Christ.
Yeah.
They make him an Iraqi sympathizer.
Very funny.
They make him a legit Iraqi sympathizer. He cuts a promo on a 5-minute. He cuts a 20-second promo in 5 minutes before he comes down to the. It's really like they're trying to get him to eat time, because he gives the longest, dumbest promo on the way to the ring, right? So he's fighting the good guy team, the face team, and that's Nikolai Volkov, who used to be a bad guy Russian, but Russia has changed, and now he loves America, right? Tito Santana, who was like the ultimate mid-Carter guy, like he's the good guy that everybody likes that is just a jobber. And then Luke and Butch, the Bushwhackers, who are a comedy tag team that used to be the most brutal men who have ever stepped in a ring, and then they were turned into just like wacky characters, right? They're also from New Zealand, not from Australia.
I did like that. Yeah, look, I was like, yeah, makes sense. Crazy New Zealanders, and then make them a funny act, which is, this. I guess I forgot to bring this up in like previous segments, but one thing that's very clear, makes a lot of sense, is this is made for kids, which is very funny to kind of watch it and analyze it as adults. Obviously, some of the things aimed at kids are not tasteful, but yeah, it is very funny that some of these people, when they weren't the WWE, were like serious, scary wrestlers. They get to WWE and they're like, let's make them fun and silly, or dress them up like a tugboat.
Yeah, it is very funny, because obviously you're selling toys, you're selling shirts, you're selling stuff like that. But there are adult wrestling fans, like that was a very common thing. So first off, Macho Man, who's not in this at all, does come out dressed up like a candy striper.
Yeah.
And cuts a promo on the Ultimate Warrior.
He's got it all figured out. He's just there to watch.
Yeah.
And he comes out on a throne.
Yeah. Everything about this is setting up 1991. Right? It's setting up a Macho Man Ultimate Warrior feud. And then Sergeant Slaughter is clearly in this to be considered a very gritty and difficult person to beat, because he is eventually going to become the champion, and Hulk Hogan is going to fight him in the next WrestleMania, which is the first pay-per-view we ever bought. We didn't have cable.
Nice.
We had to go to my grandmother's house at the time. Blah, 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 blah. Elimination results. Boris Zhukov is pinned by Tito Santana. Then Sato is pinned by Bushwhacker Butch. Tanaka is pinned again by Tito Santana. Nikolai Volkov is pinned by Sergeant Slaughter. Bushwhacker Luke is pinned by Sergeant Slaughter. Bushwhacker Butch is pinned by Sergeant Slaughter. And then Slaughter is disqualified because General Adnan, who I believe actually did go to school with Saddam Hussein, in my research, that I believe they knew each other at one point, starts like he hits Tito with an Iraqi flag in the center of the ring. The referee notices, and they do this thing where Sergeant Slaughter gets the pin, but then when Howard Finkel goes to make the announcement, he actually announced that Slaughter was disqualified. So Slaughter is dominant. He's actually the most dominant person in this whole thing. He eliminates 3 of the good guys, and then is about to eliminate the 4th one, but then gets disqualified because They used an Iraq flag to beat Tito Santana. So they needed to give it to Tito because they needed to have more than just Hogan and Warrior versus a bunch of bad guys. They also needed, again, to make Slaughter not look weak so that you can see him as a main eventer. He can't get pinned by Tito Santana and then win the championship. That would be poor wrestling, right?
Yeah.
Right.
At this point, I was just trying to figure that stuff out and like realizing the context of when this was made. And like, it just felt generally confusing where they wanted to like support the troops, but then they had a sergeant on and then they had to like make him do the opposite of what you'd assume he'd do. I mean, that's pretty much it for me. I wrote that eye scratches are funny because they don't look realistic. They just palm at people's faces.
And they like rake their hands down. Yeah.
Yeah. And then they go like, oh, and
Yeah,
it's
it's
like,
good.
why even have them?
Good acting.
Yeah.
Because they make you believe it. I will say, surprisingly less racist than I thought it was going to be.
Well, when they cut to the Middle Eastern, the Sheik character, he's yelling what I just assumed was gibberish, but maybe he's actually speaking.
It's probably Farsi.
Okay. Good. That's good. That means it's less racist than I thought.
Yeah, because I was looking it up because General Adnan, right? So Adnan Al-Qaisi, he received a scholarship to play American football. So in 1971, he won in Agbad. He beat Andre the Giant in Baghdad in 1971 under the auspices of his high school classmate, Ba'ath Party leader Saddam Hussein.
Yeah, that's nuts.
Like, that's pretty intense. Also, side note, he was born in 1939. You think he's still alive?
Oh, is he still alive?
Almost. He died in 2023.
That's nuts.
It's an insane. He was 84 when he lived. Yeah, that's great.
Good for him.
That's a bit much. That one obviously is created to build Sergeant Slaughter, right? It's done to like make Sergeant Slaughter look dominant, even though he's clearly just an out of shape guy. Like he
looks pretty big. He looks scary, but
he's a big guy.
He's big.
Yeah, I saw him at Comic-Con. I saw him at the bar at Comic-Con this year, and I was like, oh shit. I recognized him by the chin. I'm like, that dude looks like Sergeant Slaughter. And then I look closer. I was like, yeah, that makes sense.
And did he also cut you off in the omelet bar, Jeff? Jeff, who's notorious for eating too many omelets whenever he.
I've met a lot of participants in this specific pay-per-view at Comic-Cons. Now that I think about it, I've met Axe and Smash, Jake the Snake Roberts, Sergeant Slaughter. I'd have to look down and see if there are any more, but there are probably at least one more that I've met randomly at these things. I've met Marty Jannetty at a wrestling match in Massachusetts at a high school gymnasium.
Yeah, it sounds classic, like post-wrestle.
Dave.
Yeah.
We're going to play a little game, if that's okay.
Yeah.
It's called, Is This Man Still Alive?
Hold on.
Okay.
What's the rules?
The rules are I'm going to give you the name of a man that participated in this match, and you're going to tell me if they are still alive.
Okay.
Okay. Nikolai Volkov, that's the good guy, Russian.
Alive.
Dead.
Damn.
Also not Russian. He was Croatian.
Yeah, I figured.
Tito Santana.
Alive?
Alive.
Yes.
As a matter of fact, I know somebody that worked at that went to school where he was like, I believe like a custodian or a gym teacher.
Do you want a more wild fact than him being alive at age 71? He was married in 1976 and is still married.
That is
professional wrestler that wrestled in the 80s and 90s, still married.
Oh,
Bushwhacker Luke. That's the one that had less teeth.
Dead?
Alive.
Damn.
Alive. And Bushwhacker Butch, the other one.
Alive?
Dead.
Gee, I got him reversed.
Yeah, I'm going to give you half credit on both of those.
Thank you.
Which means that you get the same amount of credit. Sergeant Slaughter, the man I just saw at Comic-Con 3 months ago.
You know what? I'm going to go for a Hail Mary. I'm going to say dead.
So alive. You're wrong.
I'm going to say you murdered him.
Boris Zhukov.
Alive.
He is alive. Also, his real name, Jim.
Yeah.
Sato. That would be the bearded, short-haired Japanese gentleman.
Alive.
Alive. Very good. And Pat Tanaka, the long-haired Japanese member of the Orient Express.
Alive.
I think this is our best numbers here, right? Only one dead member. of all 8.
Maybe you're a good luck charm, Jeff, because you were there, as we've mentioned a few times. This actually has a shockingly high rate for a, I would call this late 80s. I mean, it is 1990, but like, if you look at like 80s pay-per-views, like WrestleManias, the death rate in like WrestleManias from like 85 to 90 is just absurd.
Yeah, it's a bit much. Now we get what is considered the most reviled pay-per-view moment that didn't involve somebody's accidental death happening here with the egg hatching scene. And
This is
folks,
shocking.
it is jarring. So we're trying to see who's in this egg, to which Mean Gene Okerlund says, could be the Playmate of the Month. Don't bring that up. And then have a man in a turkey suit come out. Because what ends up cracking out is the gobbledygooker, a man and by a man, I mean Hector Guerrero, who is a legendary professional wrestler, and he was a commentator in wrestling as well.
I assumed there was a wrestler in there who was being punished. That was my assumption.
He was given an opportunity.
Right.
And most famously, he has his brother, Eddie Guerrero, who is dead, in case you were wondering,
and
is considered one of the all-time greats.
He's on a wild fact about Eddie Guerrero. Eddie Guerrero was flung out of a car, probably 20 to 30 feet in the air, I think was going over 100. He survived that. So he's dead. But before Eddie Guerrero died, he survived being flung out of a car. He's ridiculous.
Yeah, I mean, you think there are some really, like, you could hear, like, Ric Flair was in a plane crash at one point in time that was pretty rough. But so the gobbledygooker, Vince McMahon had this insane idea that kids are going to love this thing. Now,
the announcers keep saying the kids are loving it. They're really trying to push this idea of like, it's okay, the kids are loving it. We're not going to cut to them loving it, but it's fine. The kids, and it just felt like cocaine and laziness.
Yeah,
like a combination of someone going, what if we have an egg there the whole time? And then, like, I don't know, a turkey comes out and dances and it'll be great. Like that seems like that was the plan. And I kept thinking, like, surely he's going to take off the turkey mask and it'll be like someone we recognize and it'll be this whole thing. But it is just that. It's just like, we'll have a turkey come out, he'll dance, and it'll be great. We'll love it. They'll love it. And then they feel so half-assed. And then when they start doing it, they realize, like, in the moment, like, we needed to offer more.
I am genuinely shocked that WWE has not edited out the chorus of boos that you can hear immediately when the egg cracks.
Yeah.
The egg cracks and people are booing this thing straight to hell.
Yeah. And they're right.
They're right to do. He and Mean Gene he does some like little wrestling acrobatics because, he's lucha libre. He grew up, doing Mexican wrestling. So he's pretty agile, Funny story. This bit lasted 5 days. This character.
It's awful.
His first appearance was this Survivor Series, which I believe was November 22nd. Yep. And his last appearance was on the main event, which was November 27th. And I think he was in the gimmick battle rumble. Like, there have been times they bring this back out as like a bit. And so
they should bring him back. I think now is the time.
They do kind of a lot. I believe there were bits like Wikipedia has that he was portrayed. Hector played him in 1990 as well as in 2001. The Boogeyman donned the costume in 2008. Someone named Maurice Ouellette in 2009. What? Xavier Woods in 2015. Jey Uso in 2015. And Drew Gulak in both 2017 and 2020 all wore this giant like turkey costume where like the head is like it's like knit.
I don't know what this is supposed to be either, because I assume it's not supposed to be an actual turkey.
Oh, like what? Like kind of a turkey homunculus, is it?
I just don't know what the internal plot line of this turkey was. Are we supposed to believe that it's a giant talking turkey? are we supposed to believe that it's a man dressed as a turkey who just was in that egg, and this is just a thing we're doing? And then I'm like, well, who's in the turkey? Like, what is the narrative here? Like, that they're trying to pitch us about this turkey.
I don't think they had that figured out. I think they were just like, the kids are gonna love it.
Yeah.
They're like, do you know how much cocaine they took? Like like, that's the thing is basically, I think Jake Roberts and Shawn Michaels took all the cocaine in the world, as we mentioned. We already know that. And they were like, do you have anything? And they're like, giant turkey and a dinosaur egg. And that's where we got that. That's my backstory.
Yeah, this is the height of hubris, is my feeling of them just being like, it'll be great.
Yeah, this is their wax wings are melting here. They flew too close to the sun and they paid for it. All this hype to get booed out of the fucking arena.
Yeah.
Do you want another weird thing, Jeff? This keeps coming up on the Nerd Show. So Jeff and I are about a year off in age, and we have a lot of similar stories. This is actually going to be the second one. So if you go back, Monster Series was the last episode. Jeff and I both have backstories where we got into like school brawls and were briefly famous in our respective areas for that. For this one, Jeff, I was actually at the first appearance of Dinger, who is the mascot for the Colorado Rockies. And they introduced him by saying when they were making Coors Field, I don't know if it's still called Coors Field, but it was at the time, that when they were making it, they found a giant egg while digging it up. And then the egg cracked. They showed it off. So in terms of storyline, Dave, for good egg stories, their storyline is while we were making the stadium, we found this giant egg underneath the stadium. We are leaving the egg where we found it, but because you're all here watching the game, we're going to show it to you. And then, oh, look at that. The egg hatches. And I think I bought a pennant with Dinger on it for $5. And I think I sold it on the bus for 10. So that's my story too. So we both oddly have childhood events, seeing a giant thing come out of an egg where there was something that's probably worth money from that event, Jeff, that neither you or I have anymore. So that's just why.
That is strange. That is one heck of an event to have. This is insane. It's weird and it's insane. It deserves the derision that it gets. And then we get to the Survivor Series finals.
I do have to ask, you were there. What was that like live? What was that like?
You know what's crazy? I don't really remember it. And I actually think that like where we were in the arena, like we didn't get a good view of it. So I don't really recall what was happening. We were probably buying merch. Like we were probably like, my dad was probably taking us to get like, shirts or something.
For the turkey?
Not for the turkey, no. Could you imagine?
So you
imagine if they had
turkey?
gobbledygooker shirts?
No, I mean, like, you don't remember the turkey. Like,
I don't really. I think I remember him being like the gobbledygooker, and then
I think your memory protected you. Your brain protected you from this.
Yeah, it is like one of those. Yeah, this is my I got molested moment, where it's like my brain was just like, you don't need to remember this scenario, and your life is easy enough that something this silly can just be blocked. We don't need to a block for something really traumatic. We can just block this. So we have that. Now we get to the finals, where it's Team Good Guys, which are Hulk Hogan and the Ultimate Warrior, and then Tito Santana. And you're like, oh. And then they're fighting the $1 Million Man. So it's the $1 Million Man and the Visionaries team. So it's, Rick Martel, the Warlord,
Hercules and Paul Roma.
Yeah, Hercules and Paul Roma.
I have pretty much no notes on this because I thought this was boring as shit.
It is.
And
it was a huge mistake.
Tugboat, and then I noted that the Ultimate Warrior, his thing seems to be that he has to pee.
His thing is that he's got so much cocaine running through his body.
Yes.
There's not a natural thing in his body. It's just cocaine and steroids.
Yeah.
If you've ever heard a promo that he cuts, it is absolutely wild. There's also a really great example of like Hulk Hogan always has to be part of the attention, even if he's not the center. Like Warrior gets the final pin, but Hulk Hogan runs in to count with the referee to like steal that thunder. So he's on camera. It's very funny. But so Warlord is flying forearmed in the brain by Tito Santana. And Tito, it's like immediate. It's like the first thing that happens. And they took Warlord out, and I'm like, man, what a way to job. To get taken out by Tito Santana, who is immediately pinned by Ted DiBiase. Because DiBiase's great. Paul Roma is pinned by Hulk Hogan after he kicks out of their finishing move, right? Rick Martel nopes the fuck out of there for a count out. He takes the big boot and rolls out and leaves because he's like, fuck this. I know the leg drop's coming. I'm not going to deal with all this. Bye. Like, he just leaves, which is the funniest thing that he's just like, because like his whole thing is he's kind of a coward. So him leaving after realizing Hulk Hogan's going to devastate him was really funny.
That was pretty great. Yeah.
Yeah. That's very funny. DiBiase's pinned by Hogan, and then Hercules is pinned by Warrior. Hogan and Warrior are the final survivors in the most obvious goddamn finish you could imagine. And
it was just, I don't know. Again, it's like good guy versus bad guy. We'd already seen Hulk win. I'm sure Hulk has lost before, but I'm like, this is just so fucking boring and predictable. I was just not into it.
Yeah. It's not interesting. Like, and also like, so here's the thing, right? I loved the Survivor Series growing up. I've watched them. I've watched the ones I loved growing up more recently. And I used to really lament that they changed the Survivor Series format and they got rid of the 4-on-4 matches. And I was like, man, that's like the whole point of the Survivor Series. So if you're changing it, it screws up the whole thing. Watching this again, I was like, they were kind of right to start weaning us off of the 4-on-4 format. And especially with that, like, the grand finale of all the survivors, it was a huge mistake. They should have let them go. They should have just like ended the night. The end.
And someone should have come out. Tugboat should have came out and fought the turkey, and then that would have been that. Like, that's all I know.
What if Tugboat comes out, like choke slams the turkey or something, and then we cut later and Tugboat is eating turkey?
No,
he
should
like
not cut
giant
later.
leg.
No, Dre, I'm gonna actually
do it live.
I'm gonna not yes and you. I'm gonna no but. You're right about the choke slamming, but then he has to eat the gobbledygooker in front of everybody,
and he doesn't enjoy it.
No, why wouldn't he? That's a man in there.
Yeah. He's crying.
Yeah, he's really. He knew Hector.
Yeah,
they were very close. He was the godfather of his child.
I'd watch that.
Yeah. Famously, if you didn't know, famously or infamously, Dave, I'm not sure if you're familiar with this character, but it's one of the funniest things in all of wrestling is that Tugboat is also known as the Shockmaster.
No.
Oh, Tugboat's the Shockmaster?
Did he tase
I love this.
people? Is he a
Tugboat
tase?
is the
It's
Shockmaster.
so much better. It's so much better.
What we're going to do then, maybe I should send you a Shockmaster video that you can watch, and then you can talk about this. Okay, we'll get there. But so in the chat, I'm going to share a link.
So before you click, we are going to play our last round of Alive or Dead. So Dave, the Shockmaster. So I'm not talking Tugboat or the person, but the Shockmaster, alive or dead?
I'm guessing dead.
All right, now keep watching. A good guess.
Wait, am I watching this whole thing?
It's 2 minutes, right?
Yeah.
Just watch it for 2 minutes and we'll edit out around the long 2-minute pause.
This may be the first time in the history of this podcast Jeff has said to actually cut something out. Normally you say leave it in. That's your gimmick.
Normally.
Well, that's a stormtrooper helmet.
It sure is. Covered in glitter.
Yeah.
Did you watch that entire thing with no reaction though, Dave?
Well, I was paying attention.
The part where he just tries getting through the wall, eats a big old bag of ass.
Yeah, was that on purpose?
Loses his mask.
No.
Puts it on and then has a man off camera start talking in like a cartoon voice.
Where were they?
That was just WCW being WCW.
Because it looks like a morning talk show. It's just a very confusing group of images. At first I was like, is one of these people this guy? And then he busts through. Like, I couldn't tell if they were doing a bit. And then the stormtrooper helmet, did they get pinged for that? Did Lucasfilm be absolutely not? That was one of the laziest things I've seen.
Correct.
Yeah.
So one of the most absolutely insane things that you could see. It's considered one of the funniest moments, one of the best botches in all of wrestling history. So much so that the Shockmaster is actually a very popular character.
Was it live?
Yes, that was the key part. That's why the Shockmaster died, is he was supposed to bust out, be this huge thing, and he just beefs it. The helmet falls off.
But like, surely
Of course
they
it's-
would see what he is before they go live and go like, you know what? Never mind. That's a stormtrooper helmet
They
with glitter
did
on
the
it.
gobbledygooker.
Yeah,
Was
that's
this
true.
before or after the gobbledygooker?
This was after.
Wow, really? Oh, but and this is WCW, not WWE, but still, yeah, I guess they hadn't learned. They still had the hubris. They're like, we failed with the gobbledygooker,
It's
but we can do
cocaine and
better.
hubris. Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
it is one of those things where it's just so absolutely like, right? So like he played the Shockmaster. And that's like such a very funny, it's just funny, right? Like this,
Yeah.
like it's just a very funny bit. He was the Shockmaster at first they tried that, and then I think they just kept the name and gave him like a I think he was like a lineman for like the phone company or something like that.
Wait, he was what?
They changed him to be like to look like a guy that works for like the phone company.
Yeah, I mean, you just need a guy with a taser if you want a shockmaster in wrestling.
And
Like, I don't need much more than that.
think they also kept doing the bit where he was a klutz. So
Yeah, you'd have
for
to lean
the
into
remainder
that.
of his career, he just had to keep being a fucking doofus,
Yeah.
which is very funny. But so that's the end of this. So Dave, like, what did you think? Grand finish of this.
I mean, like, this is a tough one because, like, I would say they start really strong with the Undertaker. They don't realize he's kind of the best thing they have, and then this whole thing just sort of slowly dies. Like, that's my feeling on this one. Like, the egg was the only thing that was like carrying me at a certain point, and then the egg crushed my hope. And then the ending battle was like whatever. I've covered like more recent wrestling events like this where it just kind of ends with like two slabs of meat just going at it, and you're like, man, bring back like the weird themes. Nothing's gonna ever be The Rock versus Stone Cold. There's a lot of wrestling that I've learned is fairly anticlimactic for this reason.
Yeah.
Where it's like they sort of start with the fun people and then they end with what was supposed to be like serious.
Yeah. I'll add, I think they knew where they were going with I think they had a very quick clue with the Undertaker, which is why they didn't allow him to be pinned in any way.
Yeah.
Like he doesn't get hurt during that.
No, he doesn't.
They
No.
have to get rid of him somehow, right? Like they just have to.
Mhm.
So I think they protected his opportunity for a legacy by letting him be counted out in there, even though that doesn't make sense with the rules.
Yeah.
But, like, I think they did know what they had with him.
Oh, I think
Yeah.
they did too.
Yeah.
I just think that Hulk Hogan and all these other people don't wow me as much as him. And maybe that is because I know what he'll be.
Yeah.
But it's like they know what they have with him, but it's like everything after that just sort of wasn't as good.
Last thing I'll say is that in this entire match, there are 6 disqualifications and 5 countouts, and that is far too many. Those are
Yes.
supposed to be very uncommon in wrestling at that time.
Agreed.
I will say this. It's bad. This is a bad show. It's important and it's historical, but it's actually bad.
Yeah.
And, you know, I brag
I
that
agree
I'm
with
there
that.
and I'm happy about that. If I were giving this a grade, I'd probably give it a C.
Ooh, that's generous, but
It may be a C minus. Like there's some fun stuff in there. Brett versus DiBiase at the end of that fight, I think is really fantastic. I loved the Visionaries versus the Vipers. I thought that was a really fun, surprising, you know, like no team has ever survived the entire team. Like I loved that. There's a couple of good highlights, but man, there's a lot of low lights and a lot of average lights.
I agree with that.
Yeah.
I would say life is very cyclical because in the modern era, we, for instance, have like The Rock and the Fast and the Furious movies. And, you know, notoriously, you'll hear behind the scenes things where these big star personalities don't want to appear weak in movies or have stipulations in their contract. And that actually explains wrestling. So when we talk like The Undertaker is the best thing they have going for them, well, look at how it ends. The end of the match is Hulk Hogan and the Ultimate Warrior. Again, Ultimate Warrior is the current champ. Hulk Hogan is the de facto champ. Hulk Hogan's a huge diva who can't let anybody else have it. Ultimate Warrior. We've even talked on this show, Jeff, on Nerd, about stuff he'd do behind the scenes where he's like, got out of my way. So that's a lot of times.
He's also a trash. He's a trash.
He's a trash.
These are both terrible.
Yeah, but that's the point. We have this amazing new character. We could build around that. And they are like, fuck no, I'm going on last. I'm going to win. And also throw in a giant turkey or something in the middle. And that's very notorious.
Here's what I'm going to tell you is, I think you're giving a lot of credit to how much sway Hogan and Warrior had for this versus what Vince wanted for them. I don't think this is them saying you can't let the Undertaker be dominant. Vince knew what he needed to get done. Like Vince knew, I need the Warrior to lose his title and I need Hogan to regain it. I need to make my two top men look like the top men without threatening them yet with the Undertaker. Now, when Hogan starts getting more creative control, that's when you get the like, that's not going to work for me, brother, kind of thing, which then you see with Dwayne Johnson when it's like, oh, you know, Black Adam is a Shazam enemy. And The Rock is basically like, that's not going to work for me, brother. I need to show up against Superman. And it's like, well, you ain't going to get shit. How about that, pal? Because your movie sucks and it didn't work.
I saw Black Adam because of Dave. My brain had blocked that out, and I just remembered that.
I don't remember such things.
Oh, fair enough.
That's fair.
For such things we don't remember, what things would that be related to, Dave?
Are you talking about the Gamefully Unemployed movie nights?
Are you trying to pull in plugs?
I am trying to pull in plugs.
Oh, folks, if you're interested in movies, you go to Gamefully Unemployed, or just Google Gamefully Unemployed, wherever. I'm not even going to plug the Patreon necessarily, just a taste first, right? Just like go wherever you get podcasts, check out Gamefully Unemployed. We do movie podcasts. We do movie reviews. We have our weekly Hypecast, which is just about movie trailers and movie, whatever's going on that week. But we also have a Patreon, patreon.com/Gamefully Unemployed, where we have movie nights. That's what you're talking about, where we watch movies every Friday night. Usually like 2 movies. Great movies. Always good movies.
Always good movies, right?
Yeah.
And by the way, that is spelled Gamefully, and then unemployed, spelled like it sounds. I am ripping off your co-host on many things, Tom Ryman. I will also shout out, you do have your YouTube channel for Gamefully Unemployed. And this is the amazing part about you, Dave. You've been going so long that the normal feeds, the podcast feeds, your RSS aggregators are going to run out of space. So I will throw this out. Your YouTube channel, if you want just a taste of the free stuff, you put all of your backlogs there. And that is a great place to find just like the back stuff. You've got years and years of this. And then again, come for the new stuff. Fox Mulder as a Maniac on Sundays is great. And I'm really looking forward to see what you'll do next. Of course, Tom and Jeff watch Batman with this guy named Jeff. Pretty good podcaster.
Not bad.
Yeah. So that stuff's good.
But yeah, Dre, what else you got going on, bud?
All right. You can find me most places on the internet as Nerd Numbers. You can find me over at the amazing YouTube channel, Jeff Has Cool Cards, where on Monday I break packs of cards to complete old sets. And, that's kind of the WWE Raw to SmackDown or whatever you would choose to another show that you'll hear about in just a second. And Blue Sky has seen an explosion, so I'm excited about that. You can find me on Blue Sky as Nerd Numbers, which makes me happy because previously it was X's Twitter, and didn't know how much longer I was going to keep that up. So that's most of what I got, Jeff. And of course, I'm proud of this show. The Nerd Podcast shows up the third Thursday of every month, and we're going to have to start thinking about what we're going to do for season 10, Jeff. Season 10.
Not only season 10 being the December free episode, but Dre, you and I have a tradition of doing Patreon exclusive episodes as well. We give little gifts to the patrons. So there will be 2 episodes of Nerds dropping next month. Is that correct?
Yeah, and we did decide it. If you go back in time on Jeff Has Cool Cards for an I'm a Straight, we discussed it there. So I think we actually did discuss it. I didn't mark it in there. So
what is it?
You're just going to have to watch them all.
Just tell me,
Jeff.
Fuck you, dude.
Doing a bit. I legit don't remember.
Oh, you don't remember? Oh, okay.
I don't. Well, you might remember.
I don't have time to find out. Anyway.
Well, and I have to go watch all of I Must Drake You again.
I hope it's 4 Christmases. I hope it's 4 Christmas. I hope we do an episode of Christmases.
Thanks for putting up this tape. All right. Well, that's my plugs. Jeff, your plugs. And
as Dre mentioned previously, at Jeff Has Cool Cards on YouTube, where I do my show, I Must Break You, every Wednesday afternoon, as well as I try to do mailbags on Fridays. I'm going to try to start doing more short breaks every once in a while, if I can. It's a little hard now that it's dark out because my living room is very poorly lit. So that makes it a little tougher. But of course, patreon.com/Jeff May. Some of you are listening to that on here. You can do all sorts of things, including getting early access to uncensored episodes with bonus content of shows like this, as well as Jeff Has Cool Friends. You can also get it into the exclusive Fine. We have a podcast with Kim Krall. You can produce these shows. You can get some of the cards that I open up. You can get those in the mail. There's a lot of opportunities to get a lot of cool shit. So head on over there. Of course, the stuff I do with Tom Ryman and Gamefully Unemployed on their Patreon, as well as all the stuff I do with Adam Todd Brown on the You Don't Even Like Podcast Network. Mint on Card is the second Friday of every month at Blast in the Past on beautiful Magnolia in Burbank, California, except December 6th. It's going to be the first Friday of the month because everybody will be out of town on December 13th and we can't have a comedy show. Anyway, this was a fun episode. I'm sorry to make you watch this.
Oh, I had a blast. I loved it.
Oh, okay. Never mind. I'm so lucky that I'm such a good person that I made you watch this.
Yeah, that's the spirit.
Yeah.
I mean, it's bad, but you got to watch it. And I'm glad Dave likes Tugboat. That is
Yeah.
very sweet, actually.
And a big shout out to Norm from Cheers for not only being a producer on the show, but also for being the reason I was able to watch this match.
Nice.
Oh, nice.
Shout out to Peacock, which I do not pay for. Anyway, bye.
Bye.
Bye.